This morning, the enemy within that is pushing our troops to the brink. Plus, the pipeline from cradle to prison. Time to cap that pipe. And the unemployment outlier. Why, for one group, 8.2% would be a victory. But first, why Mitt Romney's fight with Sesame Street proves he will never understand Main Street. Good morning. I'm Melissa Harris Perry. As ugly as American political campaigns can get, there should be a few things off limits even for the fiercest battles. One of those things is this guy, Big Bird. You know, the cherished children's hero whose foibles are the lovable learning tool for kids the world over. Big Bird, the guy who is the heart and soul of Sesame Street, the program meant to teach tolerance and cooperation. Well, not everyone would agree that Big Bird is as close to apolitical American goodness as we can get. For some, Big Bird and his gang of Muppet friends are social pariahs addicted to government handouts.
There are programs that I like PBS. I mean, my grandkids watch PBS. They like to watch Sesame Street. But, you know, I just don't think we can afford to borrow money from China to pay for things we absolutely don't have to do. And so in the case of PBS, I'd tell them, get advertisers or more contributors, but the government's not going to pick up the bill by borrowing money.
That was Mitt Romney earlier this week, speaking to Radio Iowa and laying out the kinds of savings that you can rely on from a Romney presidency. Apparently, Mr. Romney was taking Big Bird's advice. Big Bird, remember, he once said, "Show your true colors. Mine is yellow." But he was throwing it back in the bird's face. This was not Romney's first attack on our large, feathered friend.
So I'm not going to, make Big Bird go away, but there's going to be advertising on PBS if I'm president.
That's right, Big Bird. You're going to have to look for some private sector for support because President Romney is taking you off the dole. Everyone's got to earn their keep. But I have to ask, Mr. Romney, have you ever actually watched Sesame Street? Now, I know you prefer water sports with your grandkids, but I bet they can tell you how to get to Sesame Street. And you know who you will find on that block? A whole bunch of tax-paying, hard-working, enfranchised middle-class citizens. Yeah, even Oscar the Grouch does his part. You'll find Gordon, the science teacher, government worker, and Maria, who works at the library, and Alan, who runs Hooper's store, the small business which is like Sesame Street's town square. You see, life on Sesame Street is the picture of the thriving American middle class that both Mitt Romney and President Obama are employing for their campaign messages. And it's that Sesame demographic, if you will, that our candidates are always talking to.
So what I've said is, now's not the time to raise taxes on the middle class. The economy is still fragile. We're still digging ourselves out of this hole. So let's provide certainty to 98% of Americans. 98% of Americans make $250,000 a year or less. Let's say to that 98%, your taxes will not go up.
So that was the president yesterday in battleground state Virginia, appealing to the middle class with his tax plan to extend the Bush-era tax cuts for that middle demographic. So while it's certainly a winning message in campaign season, I'm still questioning a bit about whether or not it's the right thing for a robust democracy. See, the Congressional Budget Office announced this week that the average tax rate is at a 30-year low. And compared to the rest of the industrialized world, the United States has among the lowest taxes in the developed world. So is the president's tax cut extension smart policy or just about politics? Does it just become about winning that Sesame demographic? If the focus is only on bringing down the tax rate, then the middle class is just a revenue base. But the middle class is so much more than that. Think of Hooper's store. So much more than just a revenue source for the IRS of Sesame Street. It's the place where Big Bird gets his seed and puppets have their first summer job and everyone shares community news. If the Sesame class is just a tax base, why care about the middle class at all? Joining me now is Marian Wright Edelman, founder and president of the Children's Defense Fund. Bob Herbert, senior fellow at Demos, Shelby Knox, a feminist organizer, and Lawrence Otis Graham, historian, lawyer, and author of Our Kind of People, Inside the Black Upper Class. Thank you all for being here.
Good to be here.
So, Bob, why does Mitt Romney hate Big Bird?
Well, you know, the GOP is going to do to Big Bird what they've already done to the middle class, man. They're just going to get rid of it. So it's all about, you know, if Big Bird had more money, if Big Bird was wealthier, it would be protected, but that's not the case.
Well, specifically if Big Bird were privatized, right? So Ms. Edelman, we know what happens when children's programming has advertisers, right? We know what kinds of things will be advertised to children. One of the things I love about PBS is the fact that my daughter, who's 10, didn't, as a 2- and 3-year-old, see cereal commercials, didn't see toy commercials, didn't get revved up about what the next big gift was. Because, well, when you watch PBS, it's a safe space. Is this in part about taking away that kind of safe space for kids?
Which is so limited today, that safe space, as you've indicated. And children are a big commercial market, and they spend billions trying to get them addicted to certain brands. I remember going in the store with my children and walking down the aisle of the grocery store, and they would lobby me about Cheerios. I said, why am I sitting here arguing with a 2-year-old? And I realized that they are treated as a consumer market, and so children are very big business. They should keep their hands off of Big Bird and Sesame Street.
They were lobbying you about cereal. I mean, that might be good.
They wanted the brand. I want these sweet Cheerios. I'm not going to argue with my 2-year-old about that.
It's not just the children's programming, because they would be able to get advertising for Sesame Street.
Yep.
The reason you have public broadcasting is for all of those programs that can't get advertising. So, you know, there are arts programs, there are education programs, there are issues, philosophical issues that you might want to explore that you would never be able to get corporate support for. And PBS is an outlet for that sort of thing.
Right. I mean, Shelby, it feels like this point that Bob's making here is precisely this kind of larger battle that's going on right now between Democrats and Republicans about needing to make a claim that there are some sets of things that are public goods that are actually not up for sponsorship or for privatization.
You know, one of the things about PBS is that when you look at a show like Sesame Street, you see diverse families. You see children who are proud of themselves, who are being taught to value their education. When you privatize children's programming, you're not only talking about advertising, but the programming actually has to fit the advertisers. So you're looking at shows like some on Nickelodeon or Disney where you see young women who are incredibly thin because the beauty industry wants them to buy their products later. You see kids who want all of the latest electronics instead of are excited about going to school. So you're making future consumers not just through the advertisers, but if PBS were to have advertisements, you would have companies invested in the programming to make sure our future consumers are doing what they want.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. It's not that my kid didn't want a Tickle Me Elmo at one point when Tickle Me Elmo was the big deal, but she doesn't want to look like Elmo. Like, Elmo is not aspirational. So, Lawrence, I actually wanted to ask you about that aspirational aspect, because it feels to me, you know, so much of your work, particularly around the black middle class and upper class, has been about this notion of the middle class as aspirational. I wanted to listen real quickly to our vice president, who was making a very, actually, I'm sorry, not listen to him. I'll just tell you what the vice president was saying here. When he was discussing the middle class, he actually defines it as aspirational, saying that middle class families aspire to home ownership, a car, college, education for their children, health and retirement security, and occasional family vacations. That's actually the U.S. Department of Commerce and Vice President Biden saying this is what the middle class is. The story I just told is that Sesame Street is our aspirational middle class. It's what we want. It's the kind of community we wish we lived in. Is that what's dying in our current economic circumstances?
That is what's dying, Melissa. When I think about my 3 African-American children who look at shows on PBS, they see themselves, as Shelby pointed out, they see themselves reflected in those shows, in those programs, and they say, that's me, that's who I am. And my kids were so excited when Michelle Obama appeared on Sesame Street, and here she was telling them, you know, how to grow good foods that you can eat, and they felt that could be me one day. And we don't see that in commercial television that's aimed at young people, because their goal is not to show the diversity of children that are out there. Their goal is to figure out cross-promotional programs, to figure out a way to launch this particular singing star on this TV show, so that they will be able to go on parade around the country to sell what they're selling.
Right, Sesame Street's had the multi-ethnic, multiracial, multilinguistic demographic
for 30 years.
Since the 70s. Coming up, we're going to talk more about this question of the middle class, but specifically, it has been a baneful week for Mitt Romney. The one percenter is going to try to explain it all away. That's next.